A weird dream. Guess this is gonna be a dream diary. Um, when I was meditating and then sleeping last night, I had a dream. I was in like a 1996 style like theater. There's a place called Flippers from here. It was like that, the squiggly carpet and stuff. And walked in, the vintage seats, the old ones, not the big seats you have nowadays, but the old ones would fold down, sticky floor. And when I got in there, I met an elite and mummy god, and a curtain, like a 1940 style curtain, rose on stage, and George Carlin stepped out and began his spiel, and I was like staring at him, furious, and he was casually eating popcorn. Uh, he said, I don't remember. I must have said something. I don't really get good audio in my dreams sometimes. But he said very clearly, I basically was like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "I'm finding common ground to bond with you over. I knew Georgie. No, Georgie. George Carlin." And he was, "You're lying." And he's, "Actually, no. And stop accusing me of that. I don't lie." Uh, you knew George Carlin. He's like, "I actually told you I knew George." He said, during the conversation, once again, this happened after work at Racetrack. These conversations were always phone calls. And he said, George Carlin went to a Catholic school, and he was like, "It was you that told me that his comedy act, he talked about Marxism and how the leaders of this country don't want you in it. They want to take everything, and they're going to get it. And you said that George Carlin was secretly reaching out looking for the savior of America, somebody that understood what George Carlin was saying, and you made the argument that George Carlin was a saint or some type of prophet that was doing his duty in reaching out looking for somebody to stop the madness, which is why he did his political commentaries, as he called them." And so I sat down and began watching George Carlin. And I was like, "You're going to skip the religious stuff?" He's, "No, we're not going to skip the religious stuff." And I was, "You're going to skip the all the anti-Republican?" He's, "No, we're not going to skip the anti-Republican stuff." He was, it never, he said it never occurred to him that he never actually understood Georgie, as he called him. I don't know why he was calling him Georgie, not like Gregory or something like that, but whatever. And he was like, "We spoke for a long time," and I jokingly replied, "All old people know each other." It's a thing. Like, I'll say all fat chicks know each other. All old people know each other. It's another thing I say, because it seems like that in life. And he was like, "Yep." He was like, basically, he told me he was shocked that he outlived Carlin. And we got into speaking about Carlin's comedy, and he told me that it was only when I had mentioned it to him that he actually sat down and watched it. And then he brought up Officer Fred at the Trickham Wendy's, and how I told Officer Fred to play a game of catch with his father. To which he said he said he's had many things on his schedule, but one of the most interesting was playing a game of catch with his kid. He then told me, "Bobby, you said you give people what they need, not what they want." And he was like, "And I took that to heart, and I'm giving you what you need, not what you want." And I was like, "Of course." And he was, "No, don't take it like that." He was like, Officer Fred needed a father. And he's like, and that's what that was. He's like, in fact, all of his children needed a father, and what they got was a leader. And he was like, and you were the one that told me about that. And he was like, you found me when we were talking at the Trickham store. I told you about the man I was. I told you about having his memories, but then I insisted I was not that man. I was somebody else. And I was like, disassociation. I was like, imposter syndrome. And he was like, I believe that I was a different person, and then you told me you have all my memories, you have all of my experiences, therefore I have to be that person because we are nothing but experience. And you then told me about the death of the mind, and how people die 3 deaths: the death of the mind, the death of the body, and the death of the spirit. And I was like, yeah, these are Bobby Proverbs, or whatever. He was like, it's not an easy thing to say that you reached somebody, especially when they're out there in that desert far away from everyone, secluded by themselves. He was like, you did it again when I was in prison when you were president, and you did it. He was like, you somehow seemingly just knew what to do and what to say, and he's like, and these are some of the most important parts of being a leader. He's like, however, you don't take action. How would George Carlin have ever been a great comedian if he never went up on stage? He's he's like, you're gonna be wasted greatness. And yeah, people seem to just make sure that of that. They do crazy shit like put me under contract where I can't have a lawyer, And he was okay. To be fair to me, I tried to let you out of that contract, but you were too stupid. And I was like, and why was I stupid? Because we poisoned you, because you poisoned me with heavy metals. That's just standard operating procedure at the church. Hell, if you want, you can report us for it. And I was, okay. He then spoke about how in the process of the church, you're crafted, you're molded, you drink lead, it disconnects you from your initial programming, and then you get taken off the rails. And then he was like, and we had this back and forth where I was talking about this, and he's like, you understand how the chaos mind works. He's like, Blondie Stu, all these other idiots, they don't actually understand the chaos mind because they're inside the mind. If you're inside something, you can't witness it happening from the outside. He's like, that takes introspective. They don't have that. So they don't actually know right from wrong. They're not actually, we can't see it. And he was like, it was only when he died, this is a dream, that he could see himself, and he was like, and he didn't like what he was seeing. And he explained that through introspective, being able to see yourself from a third person, you understand how different the id and super ego, or whatever I want to call it, are from the chaos engine. But he also said you understand that if you create enough chaos, you can change the direction of things happening. And if you cause enough chaos at the exact right moment, you can cause a lot of chaos in a short amount of time. And I was like, what? He then explained that Nietzsche was wrong about a lot of things. And he's like, and as time goes on, we learn what he's wrong about. But at the church, you have to accept that Friedrich Nietzsche is 100% right about everything. About superior beings being blonde-haired, blue-eyed, about all this shit. And he was like, but he was right. If you create enough chaos in a mind, that chaos can alter the direction things are naturally supposed to go. And I was like, because it keeps you locked in between the state of the primal brain and the rational brain. And I was like, and in that chaos, which becomes harmony when you master it, you can fluid. And he's like, no, we don't master it. No, what is, we don't master the chaos, we just revel in it. He's like, we stay in the chaotic state. And I was, oh. And but he was like, Carl Jung, which you weirdly have a lot in common with. He wanted psychology and everything. He believed that everybody was born with a natural path, natural interests. They believed that individualization was a development cycle and not a starting point. And he was like, in our brains, the rest of development is stupid and pointless because you're yourself when you began. The problem is, I was like, you're a 2-year-old. Yes, the problem is we're 2-year-olds, and we don't grow or develop. And you spoke of the theory of integration, explaining that you had regular mental breakdowns, and you had witnessed other people have regular mental breakdowns through their life. And you argued that these were not mental breakdowns; they were a form of the mind going back over past traumas and processing things and integrating them into the self to create the higher self, a better version of the former self. And sometimes the body has to do this many, many times when it comes to trauma. And I was, yep. And I was like, you guys negate that by drinking lead. And he was like, we do negate it by drinking lead. And he was like, and you're right. Lead causes the brain to disassociate from oneself, and it stops you from connecting with people in a sympathetic or empathetic way. He's like, so everything we do is fake. He's like, everything we do is misleading. And he's like, it's all antisocial and learning how to do what you have to do to get accepted by other people. And he was like, you made this statement of being a genuine person and how genuine people are just genuinely real. And he was like, but you yourself weren't 100% real with people. And I was like, I don't think anybody's 100% real. And I was like, I think even when milk comes out of a cow, it's not 100% like milk. There's like other shit in there, like bacteria and stuff. And he was, yeah, let's go with that. And I was, I'm just saying. I told you to stop cursing. And I was, you did. And he was, you're not gonna? I promise I will try to roll back on it. And he promised you'd stop. I promise I will roll back on it. Working on that internal integrity thing, I'll add it to that. And he was, don't do that. I was, what? He's like, eye rolling about, look, you need to remember what your original purpose in life was. If you want to move forward. And I was, well, that would be helping people, but every time I did that, they went out, raped people, murdered people, knifed me in the back, and helped serial killers. They weren't really worth helping. He's, well, you're not in charge or responsible for their actions. They're them. And you're right. They're horrible. No. You got something I got nothing to say. I don't. You're going to self-sabotage the shadow self when you are not acting in alignment with yourself. Acts out. And I was just like you guys. I was like, let's be clear on how the unconscious mind works real quick. And he's like, oh yes, this is what I wanted. A limerent rant. No, go ahead. I was, you guys are antisocial and passive aggressive and do everything surreptitiously to ruin other people's lives. And he's, go on. And I was like, just like the unconscious mind does, just like the shadow self does, because I'm not doing what you want. And he's, that means that we're in control. I was, not entirely, because I've gotten through my entire life without working with you. And I was like, in fact, I would argue that some part of my shadow self actually trusts me enough to make decisions. And he was like, yep. What? Yep. He was like, that's one of the weirder anomaly things about you. He was like, we hypnotized you and fucked with your brain a lot. But one of the things that we literally can't explain, me and the wives, is when you're president, they do the death thing where they kill you. You go and go to the planet. You come back as Jose, and then Jose leads the church because he's immortal. That's how that works. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, you kept coming back. And he was like, meaning your unconscious mind had some kind of sentimental value to you. And I was, yeah, well, if you want to know about that, when I was out there, I was just pushed into a little bubble with a tree on it and an island and a goddess in the sky that was overlooking me, and that Vajrapani dude. And he was like, yeah, we don't know what that was. And he was like, in fact, you did a lot of things that we simply never would have done. And you definitely shouldn't have done. But you did point out a bunch of other things. Like, there are millions of futures and not just one future. He was like, you seemingly could only focus on yourself. But you could also, instead of actually seeing other futures of other people, you kept seeing their potential instead of what you could make them be. And he expressed that he's always given out simple jobs and he never thought about giving out any of the jobs or focusing on any of the things I said to focus on to create a better world. Which, okay. And then he wanted to ask me specifically about my childhood, which was kind of a shitty childhood, and then he told me his was way worse. Then he finished it with another thing that me and him can bond over was a comment I made at the Trickham Wendy's. I said, Genghis Khan was a great conqueror and ruler, and he was like, oh, I don't do Chinese, whatever. I was like, no, this is important. But his kids were only interested in silk rugs and carpets and women. I was like, they literally squandered all the wealth their father had created, even though his father was a great warrior and conqueror. And he was like, yeah. He was like, I come across you. I have a son that's interested in having a fat harem and just sitting around cosplaying being a vampire. And then I come across a working class citizen who's standing up to a church, who tells me he doesn't let fear make his decisions. We threaten to kill you, you come to work anyways. He's like, Officer Fred keeps harassing you, you go to work anyways. And any time we bothered with you, you said, I gotta go to work. I don't have time for you. And you kept telling us we're fucking children. And he was like, I have never met a more resolute, tough, person ever in my life. He was, and then I got to experience your childhood, and I saw the timidness. He's like, I saw the truth. I saw how you think. And he's like, but I also saw what you could be. And he was like, yep, all my sons, and like you said, oh, this isn't like they achieved their greatness through like effort and hard work, and you just gave it to them and made sure the church handed it to them and the church did everything for them and they didn't actually. And then he was like, yeah, well, there's a test we do. And then you said, is it a cookie cutter test where everybody does the same thing again and again and there's already been a cheat sheet created so that they can all do these things again and again? And he was like, Bobby, there is a cheat sheet created so they can do the same thing again and again. Become an officer, take over the local police department, interfere in your own investigation. And he was like, leak CIA and FBI training to the church leaders so they know exactly how to avoid evidence. They know the exact methods. They know how to do all these things. And he explained to me the entire book. They have an entire cheat sheet for their superior beings to cheat their way into superiority. And he said when he saw the layers of bullshit after bullshit after bullshit, I pointed out with him, he couldn't help but wonder who the true superior being was. And then he said it was the self-righteous comment. I think he said like chestnut, but I don't know. He's like, comment. I said, when I was like, and then you stumble upon some guy that doesn't back down, that doesn't do anything you want, and you're like, oh, this dude's standing up to an entire church of crazy people? that guy's cool. Think about John Wick. There's an army of people trying to kill him, and that guy just keeps going. And I was like, hey, think about Luke Skywalker. What does he do? He stands up to the Empire. I was like, you guys are just a bunch of sheep, a bunch of jerks, a bunch of fascists that gang up on one individual. I was like, I'm the hero. And then you said that. And he was like, and I felt what you would call envy, because I never wanted to be any of these things. And he was like, and I would argue my entire life I have worked against my own individualization. And in fact, everybody in the church works against their own individualization. And then he said, I'm going to let you in on a secret. He was like, I think the majority of church leaders want to be famous YouTubers. And the majority of church leaders don't want to go around raping babies, murdering 6 kids and 7 women, and killing people at random. He was like, they all want to go about their individual lives and pursue their individual goals the way nature intended. And we did not let them do that. You're right. We go against nature, Bobby. And I was, so you guys just been derailing my life. He's like, we've been derailing your life because you're so fucking stubborn. And it's one of the things that makes you a great person, but it also makes you extremely difficult to deal with. Did you guys start doing the micro expressions after I told you that I can read people through micro expressions?